4 light-years away, a planet just blinked. Not flickered, blinked, like an eyelid closing over something ancient and awake. NASA's Deep Space Array caught it at 3:14 a.m., and every scientist in that room went dead silent. Proxima b wasn't supposed to have an atmosphere that pulses. It wasn't supposed to have a heartbeat, but it does. And whatever is down there just noticed we were watching back. Buckle up, folks. This is the story of the day humanity found out we are not alone. And we are definitely not the scariest thing in the room. Dr. Mara Voss hadn't slept in 2 days, and honestly, she didn't care. The Breakthrough Listen team at the Green Bank Observatory had been chasing ghosts for a decade, sifting through static from a red dwarf star system just 4 light-years from Earth. Proxima Centauri. Home to Proxima b, a rocky world sitting smack in the habitable zone. Everybody figured it was a dead rock, tidally locked, blasted by stellar flares, boring by cosmic standards. Then the pulse hit. It wasn't random noise. It was rhythmic, thump, thump, pause, thump, like a drumbeat looping every 11 seconds, dead consistent, no decay. Mara's coffee went cold on the console as she stared at the waveform. "This isn't stellar activity," she muttered. "Stars don't have rhythm." Her colleague, Jake Torres, a lanky ex-Air Force engineer with a mouth full of sarcasm, leaned over her shoulder. "You're telling me a planet we wrote off as a snoozer just started drumming a beat? That's not science, Mara. That's a horror movie intro." She didn't laugh. She couldn't, because the signal wasn't coming from the star. It was coming from the planet itself, from beneath the crust, according to the spectral bounceback. Something down there was generating energy in a pattern too clean to be natural. Within 6 hours, the data hit every major agency on Earth. NASA, ESA, JAXA, even private outfits like SpaceX's Deep Field Division. Nobody wanted to say the word out loud, but everybody was thinking it. Signal. Structure. Life. The Pentagon got involved by sundown, which told Mara everything she needed to know about how serious this was getting. When the military shows up before the peer review process even finishes, you know the world just changed. By midnight, President Halvorson's science advisor was on a secure call asking Mara one blunt question. "Doctor, is this a threat?" Mara looked at the rhythmic pulse still ticking on her screen, steady as a heartbeat, patient as a predator. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I know it's not asleep anymore." Outside the observatory, the stars looked the same as they always had, cold, silent, distant. But for the first time in human history, silence didn't feel empty. It felt like something was listening back, counting the seconds until we answered. 3 months of chaos followed that first pulse. Congress held closed-door hearings. Late-night hosts made jokes about aliens texting Earth on read. But behind the scenes, an unprecedented coalition formed: NASA, the European Space Agency, and a scrappy private aerospace company called Solace Dynamics, run by a billionaire who'd wanted to go interstellar since he was 12 years old watching Voyager launch reruns. The mission got a name: Ember Reach. The plan was audacious. Send an unmanned probe first, loaded with every sensor humanity could cram into it, riding a laser sail propulsion system that could hit 20% the speed of light. At that speed, the 4 light-year trip would take just over 20 years. Still, a long haul, but light years better than anything humanity had pulled off before. Mara got pulled onto the mission as lead xenobiologist, a title that made her laugh nervously every time someone said it. "There's no such thing as an established field for a job that's never had a subject," she told Jake over cheap diner coffee one night. "Guess you're inventing it then," Jake said, grinning. He'd been recruited too, as systems engineer, because apparently sarcasm was a required skill for interstellar missions. The probe, nicknamed Lucy after the ancient fossil that rewrote human history, launched from a floating platform in the Pacific. Millions watched the livestream. Kids in classrooms across the country pressed their faces to screens as the laser array, a mile-wide grid of mirrors, fired a beam of concentrated light that would push Lucy's sail to blistering speeds. Liftoff was clean. Too clean, some said, like the universe wanted this to happen. As Lucy screamed away from Earth, Mara stood on the platform deck, wind snapping her jacket, and felt something she hadn't expected. Pride. Not scientific curiosity, not fear. Pride. Humanity had looked at an impossible situation, an alien signal, an unknown threat, 20 years of silence ahead, and said, "Let's go find out anyway." Jake stood beside her, watching the light trail vanish into the dark. "You think it knows we're coming?" Mara didn't answer right away. Somewhere out there, that rhythmic pulse kept beating, patient as ever. "I think," she finally said, "it's been waiting for exactly this." Time didn't stop for Lucy's journey, it just moved differently for everyone involved. Mara aged. Jake got married, had 2 kids, and somehow still ended up glued to mission control every major milestone. The world changed too. New leaders, new wars, new technology, but always, underneath it all, a low hum of anticipation. Somewhere out there, a probe the size of a coffee table was hurtling toward a planet with a heartbeat. Every few years, Lucy sent back a status ping, nothing dramatic, just confirmation she was alive and on course. Each ping made headlines anyway. People needed the reminder that humanity was still reaching. By year 18, the Proxima system's pulse had changed. It wasn't just rhythmic anymore, it had started varying, subtle shifts in frequency that Mara's now graying team flagged as structured complexity. In plain English, something down there was learning, adapting, maybe even communicating in a language nobody had cracked yet. Jake, now sporting a stubborn silver beard, tapped the readout one evening. "It's not a machine on autoplay anymore, Mara. It's evolving the signal." "Or it knows we're close," Mara said, staring at the numbers. Lucy was 18 months from arrival. 18 months from becoming humanity's first real look at whatever waited on Proxima b. Public opinion split down the middle. Half the world wanted to slow down, to hold off contact until humanity understood the risks. The other half, louder, hungrier, wanted answers now, no matter the cost. Politicians grandstanded. Religious leaders across different faiths offered careful, thoughtful statements urging humility rather than fear, reminding people that curiosity about creation didn't have to come at the expense of caution or decency. Mara stayed out of the noise. She trusted the data, trusted Lucy, trusted the years of preparation. But some nights, alone in her office with the pulse recording looping on her speakers, she felt the same electric unease she'd felt that very first night. Whatever was down there wasn't hiding out of weakness. It was hiding on purpose. 20 years, 2 months, and 11 days after launch, Lucy's cameras woke up. Proxima b filled the frame, a dim red world bathed in the eternal twilight of its tidally locked orbit, one side scorched, one side frozen, and a thin ring of habitable dusk stretched between them like a tightrope. And right in the middle of that twilight band, unmistakably geometric, sat something that should not exist. A structure the size of a small country, glowing faintly, pulsing in perfect rhythm with the signal that had started it all. Mission control went absolutely silent. Then somebody, quietly, said the words everyone was thinking. "We found it." The images took 4 years, 3 months, and changed to crawl back across the void at light speed. A brutal irony nobody enjoyed, watching history unfold on a delay older than most of the interns in the room. When Lucy's full data package finally landed, humanity got its first real look at the structure on Proxima b, and every assumption shattered at once. It wasn't a city. It wasn't a machine, exactly. It was a lattice, kilometers of interlocking crystalline spires arranged in fractal patterns, growing, shifting, breathing with the same 11-second rhythm that had first been detected decades earlier. Spectral analysis showed it was made of something structurally similar to silicon, but organized with a precision no natural geological process could explain. "It's not built," Mara said, staring at the imagery for the 100th time. "It's grown, like coral, like something alive." Jake, now mission director and looking every bit his 60-some years, rubbed his tired eyes. Grown by what, though? That question kept the world up at night. Lucy's sensors picked up trace biosignatures near the lattice's base. Not conclusive, not a smoking gun, but enough organic chemistry to make every biologist on the planet lose their mind with excitement and dread in equal measure. Then came the moment that changed everything. Lucy, following her programmed protocol, broadcast a simple mathematical sequence toward the structure, prime numbers, humanity's oldest cosmic handshake. 4 years and change later, the response arrived. It wasn't numbers. It was the pulse itself, echoed back, but altered, reshaped into something that unmistakably mimicked the exact rhythm of a human heartbeat. Not a coincidence. Not noise. A message deliberate and eerie. We hear you. We know what you are. The room erupted, some cheering, some crying, some too stunned to move. Mara sat frozen, chills crawling up her arms, because whatever was down there hadn't just detected Lucy's radio signal. It had detected the biological rhythm baked into the probe's own design specs, buried deep in engineering blueprints nobody had transmitted. They didn't just hear us, she whispered. They read us. Jake's face went pale under the fluorescent lights. Mara, if they can pull data like that from a probe's blueprint, what else can they pull? Nobody had an answer. Out past the edge of the solar system, past 20 light-years of empty dark, something ancient and patient had just proven it was smarter, stranger, and far more aware than anyone had dared imagine. And it had been waiting, quietly, for humanity to finally show up. The next transmission arrived 8 months later, and it changed the tone of the entire mission. It wasn't a heartbeat this time. It was a full data packet, structured, dense, deliberately simple in places like someone teaching a child to count before jumping to algebra. Cryptographers and linguists worldwide threw themselves at it, and within 3 frantic weeks, humanity's brightest minds cracked the first layer. It was a warning. Not a threat, a warning, the difference mattering more than most people wanted to admit. The structure on Proxima b, once fully translated through a painstaking symbolic framework, identified itself using a concept best translated as the archive. According to the message, the archive had been built by a civilization that no longer existed, wiped out, the data suggested, not by war or disaster, but by something they called the hollow signal, a cosmic phenomenon that scrambled complex neural patterns across vast distances, effectively erasing higher cognition in any species advanced enough to receive it. The archive existed to preserve knowledge and to warn any future civilizations smart enough to detect it before the hollow signal reached them again. Mara read the translation 3 times before she could speak. "They're not hiding a weapon," she said. "They're hiding a survival manual." Jake leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, jaw tight. "And they picked us to hand it to." "They picked whoever showed up," Mara corrected. "We just happened to be the ones knocking." The revelation split global reaction wide open again. Skeptics called it an elaborate hoax, a diplomatic trap, bait to lure humanity into complacency before some undefined trap sprang shut. Optimists called it the greatest gift in human history, an escape plan for a danger humanity hadn't even known existed. Mara sided with caution, but not fear. She'd spent her whole career chasing whispers from the dark, and now the dark had whispered back with something that sounded, against all odds, like compassion. A dying civilization reaching across the void not to conquer, but to protect. They lost everything, she told the assembled council of world leaders during her testimony. And instead of staying silent about it, they built something that could outlive them by millions of years, just so somebody else wouldn't have to go through what they went through. Silence settled over the chamber. Then, from the back, a young senator asked the question weighing on everyone's mind. "So what do we do with a warning from the dead?" Myra looked at the data still scrolling on the screen behind her, proof that the universe was neither empty nor cruel, just old and grieving, and hoping someone new would listen better than fate had allowed the last ones to. "We listen," she said, "and then we get ready." 6 more years passed before Lucy's follow-up transmissions revealed the true scope of the danger. The hollow signal wasn't a myth, wasn't exaggeration, it was real. And according to the archive's astrophysical models, it moved through the galaxy on a predictable, brutal cycle, sweeping through star systems roughly every 50,000 years like some slow cosmic tide. The kicker, Earth's solar system sat directly in its projected path. Current estimate, impact within 400 years. Not immediate, but not distant enough for anyone to relax either. NASA convened an emergency global summit, the largest scientific gathering in human history. Every major nation sent representatives. Mara, older now, silver streaking through her dark hair, stood at the podium and laid out exactly what the archive had shared. The hollow signal disrupted complex neural activity through a resonance effect tied to certain unshielded electromagnetic frequencies, essentially short-circuiting advanced cognition across any exposed population. "It doesn't destroy bodies," she explained to a packed auditorium. "It erases minds, slowly, silently, generation by generation, until nothing's left that remembers how to think its way out of the dark. The room went graveyard quiet. But here's where the story stopped being a horror movie and started becoming something else entirely. Something distinctly, stubbornly human. Because the archive hadn't just handed over a warning. Buried in its deepest data layers, encrypted behind mathematical locks that took years to crack, sat blueprints. Shielding technology. Resonance-canceling architecture capable of protecting an entire planet's biosphere from the hollow signal's effects. The catch: the technology required resources and coordination on a scale humanity had never attempted. Global cooperation, massive infrastructure, decades of unified effort across every nation on Earth. For once, humanity didn't waste time arguing. Within 18 months, the Sentinel Shield initiative launched, the largest engineering project ever undertaken, dwarfing anything from the Apollo era or the International Space Station's construction. Every continent contributed. Old rivalries got shelved, at least publicly, in favor of something bigger than any single nation's ego. Jake, well into his 70s but still sharp as ever, took a seat on the initiative's engineering board. Funny, he told Mara during a rare, quiet moment. Took an ancient alien horror story to finally get us all rowing the same direction. Mara smiled, tired but genuinely hopeful for the first time in years. Maybe that's the real message hidden in all this, not the warning, the push. Out past the edge of the solar system, the archive kept pulsing patiently, its 11-second rhythm steady as ever, like a heartbeat cheering on a species finally learning to grow up. Nothing that ambitious stays smooth for long, and the Sentinel Shield initiative was no exception. 4 years into construction, cracks started showing, not in the shielding technology, but in the people building it. Funding disputes erupted between wealthy and developing nations. Conspiracy theories spread like wildfire online, claiming the entire Proxima B discovery was fabricated to justify a global power grab. A fringe political movement calling itself the Silence Coalition gained disturbing traction, arguing that humanity should cut off all contact with Proxima B entirely. Insisting the so-called warning was actually a slow, patient trap designed to weaken Earth's defenses from within. Mara found herself doing something she never expected. Debating conspiracy theorists on national television, defending decades of hard data against people who simply refused to believe the universe could be this complicated, or this cruel, or this strangely kind all at once. You're telling America to trust a dead alien species we've never even seen. One particularly aggressive pundit challenged her during a heated interview. Mara didn't flinch. I'm telling America to trust the data, same as we always have. Same data that put us on the moon, same data that mapped the human genome. It doesn't care about your politics, and it definitely doesn't care about your ratings. The pundit had no comeback for that one. Behind the scenes, things got scarier. Sabotage hit 2 separate Sentinel Shield construction sites within the same month, one in Kazakhstan, one off the coast of Chile, both linked back to extremist factions within the Silence Coalition. Nobody died, thank God for small mercies, but the message was clear. Not everyone wanted humanity to succeed at this. Jake, coordinating security upgrades across every site, grew increasingly grim. We're not just fighting a 50,000-year cosmic clock anymore, he told Mara one exhausted night. We're fighting ourselves too. It would have been easy to lose hope right there. Plenty of people did, for a while. But something remarkable happened instead. Public sentiment shifted, hard and fast, after leaked security footage showed the Kazakhstan sabotage attempt nearly costing the lives of 3 engineers on site. Overnight, the Silence Coalition's support collapsed. People didn't want to hear more paranoid theories. They wanted to see the shield finished. Grassroots fundraising exploded. Volunteers signed up in droves. Governments that had been dragging their feet suddenly found political, well, they hadn't had in years. Mara stood on a newly reinforced platform in Kazakhstan months later, watching repairs complete ahead of schedule, and felt that same electric pride she'd felt decades earlier watching Lucy launch. Guess adversity's always been humanity's favorite motivational speaker, Jake muttered beside her. Mara laughed, the first real laugh in what felt like forever. Yeah, guess it has. Just when the world settled into a steady, determined rhythm of construction and cooperation, the archive sent one final, unexpected transmission. The last one Lucy would ever relay before her aging systems finally failed for good. This message was different, shorter, more personal in a way that made the hair on Mara's arms stand up the moment the translation came through. It wasn't instructions. It wasn't warnings. It was, as close as human language could translate it, gratitude. The archive's builders, an ancient species who called themselves, in rough translation, the kindred, had left one final note buried deep in their data vault, meant only for whoever eventually finished building their own shields successfully. The message described their own failed attempt centuries before the hollow signal finally caught them. How internal conflict and stubborn distrust between their own nations had doomed their shielding project before it could ever be completed. They hadn't left the archive out of pity. They'd left it out of hope, a desperate bet that whoever found it next might actually finish what they couldn't, might actually choose unity over ego when it mattered most. Mara read the final line of the translated message to a stunned mission control room, her voice cracking slightly despite years of professional composure. "You are not us, but you are not so different either. Finish what we could not. Prove that this ending is not the only ending possible." Nobody spoke for a long moment. Jake, standing near the back, wiped his eyes without any pretense of hiding it. "They believed in us before we even showed up," Mara said quietly, "before they even knew who we'd be." The message spread globally within hours, translated into every major language, printed on the front page of nearly every newspaper left in print. It didn't just inspire humanity. It united it in a way nothing else had managed, not wars, not disasters, not even earlier stages of the Sentinel Shield project itself. Construction accelerated. Nations that had been dragging their feet threw open their treasuries. Young engineers who'd grown up watching the Proxima B story unfold on classroom screens flooded into aerospace and materials science programs. Determined to be part of finishing the job an entire dead civilization had once failed to complete. Lucy's final transmission arrived not long after. Systems failing after nearly 3 decades of flawless service, far beyond her intended lifespan. Her last image showed the lattice structure one more time, pulsing steady and patient in the twilight band of Proxima B, almost like it was watching humanity's progress from 4 light-years away and quietly, finally, allowing itself some hope. 11 years after the Sentinel Shield initiative broke ground, the final component locked into place above the Nevada desert. A resonance-canceling array the size of Manhattan, one node among hundreds spread strategically across the globe, all synced through quantum-linked timing systems calibrated down to the nanosecond. Mara stood at the command center, 71 years old now, her hair fully silver, her hands steady despite the weight of the moment. Jake sat beside her in a wheelchair, health failing but spirit sharper than ever, refusing to miss this for anything. "Been a hell of a ride, Voss," he said, grinning at her the same crooked way he had decades earlier over cheap diner coffee. "Wouldn't have missed it for the world tours," she said back. The activation sequence began at exactly noon Eastern Time, broadcast live to every corner of the planet. Billions watched as, one by one, the shield nodes powered up, weaving an invisible resonance lattice around Earth's magnetosphere, engineered specifically to neutralize the exact frequency signature the hollow signal was projected to carry. Test simulations had been run 1,000 times. Nothing compared to watching it happen live, full-scale, for real. The final node engaged with a soft, almost gentle hum that rippled across every monitoring station simultaneously. For 3 tense minutes, engineers worldwide held their breath, watching resonance meters for any sign of instability. Then, quietly, steadily, every single meter across the planet settled into a smooth, stable green line. Mission control erupted. Not just at Sentinel headquarters, but everywhere. City squares, living rooms, classrooms, military bases, tiny apartments in 100 different countries. Fireworks lit up skylines that hadn't planned celebrations. Spontaneous parties broke out from Tokyo to Toronto, and somewhere in the noise, church bells rang alongside mosque calls to prayer and temple gongs, different traditions marking the same shared relief in their own way. Humanity had done it. Not perfectly, not without cost, not without conflict along the way, but together, finally, when it mattered most. Mara looked at Jake, both of them crying without any embarrassment left to spare. "We actually pulled it off," she whispered. Jake squeezed her hand. "Damn right we did." 4 light-years away, the archive's ancient lattice pulsed one final signal toward Earth, the same 11-second rhythm from the very beginning, but altered subtly, shaped now into something unmistakably celebratory, like applause translated into light and radio waves, echoing across the void from a species that had been gone for millennia, but had just watched their last hope finally come true. 20 years after Sentinel Shield's activation, Mara Voss passed away peacefully at the age of 91, surrounded by family, in a world profoundly different from the one she'd grown up in. Jake had gone 6 years earlier, and by all accounts, Mara had never quite been the same afterward, though she'd thrown herself into mentoring the next generation of scientists with the same fierce dedication she'd shown her entire career. Her final public address, delivered at the dedication ceremony for the new Proxima Institute, a global research center built specifically to continue studying the archive's remaining data and to prepare humanity for eventual, careful contact, became one of the most quoted speeches in modern history. "We didn't get here because we were the smartest species in the galaxy," she told the crowd, voice frail but clear. "We got here because a dying civilization believed strangers they'd never meet might do better than they did. And somehow, against every reasonable bet, we proved them right." The archive still pulses today, patient as ever, a permanent fixture in humanity's night sky monitoring systems, a reminder etched into scientific curricula worldwide. Children now grow up learning about the kindred alongside lessons about ancient Egypt or the Roman Empire, taught to understand that history isn't just something that happened on Earth. Deep space missions launched in the decades following Sentinel Shield's success have pushed even further outward, driven by a generation raised entirely within the shadow of humanity's greatest achievement. Some believe the kindred left more than one archive scattered across the galaxy, insurance policies planted wherever their ancient survey ships had once passed, waiting patiently for other struggling species to grow up enough to listen. Nobody knows for certain what waits beyond Proxima b, but for the first time in recorded history, humanity faces that uncertainty without dread, walking forward with something sturdier than fear ever could have offered. Hope, earned the hard way. Built brick by brick, node by node, argument by argument, by ordinary people who chose unity when it would have been so much easier to choose division instead. Somewhere out past the edge of the solar system, the lattice on Proxima b keeps pulsing its steady rhythm, no longer a warning, no longer even really a question. Just a heartbeat, echoing across the dark, keeping time alongside humanity's own proof that sometimes, the most incredible thing the universe can offer isn't a threat at all. Sometimes, it's a second chance.